Okay, great. Thanks everybody for taking the time and welcome for Celero's and Microsoft's Office 365 update. This has been quite a journey for us to get to this point to share some great news and the feature set of Office 365. I know everyone has been asking and has been very patient with us as we've been working diligently with Microsoft consulting services to assess our on-prem current environment and making sure that we do it right the first time. And because Office 365, again, is just the first step towards other cloud offerings to come in the future. So we have implemented best practices and using consulting from Microsoft directly, built repeatable processes to make this journey as smooth as possible for all of you who are interested in coming on board. So looks like we have a record number of attendees on the call today as well. So thank you all for taking the time for doing that. I'll get into it in just a moment. Just some housekeeping items. We ask that you mute yourself during the presentation, just in the best interest for best call quality. We are recording this session because we intend on making this presentation available after it's completed, and just so you're aware of that. And as far as questions are concerned, there's two options. You can ask the question right in the chat box comment section as the chat's going. A moderator will be monitoring the questions as you go. The questions will be read out loud at the end of the presentation for everybody's benefit and will be answered. Or you can ask the question live at the end as well. So those are that. With that, I'll just get right into it and do some introductions here. On the call here, we've got Brad Pollack from Microsoft, who's a partner development manager. We've been working with him for a number of years now, and is essentially our go-to person from day to day, and our strategic vision and bringing that to light with Celero. Brandy Vaslanik is our product manager for managed services. Brandy essentially leads our cloud services area and all offerings coming in this space. We've also got Kristen Wilson on the call, who's the Director for Client Solutions and Business Development for Managed Services, and then myself, the General Manager for Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services. So with that, let's just get right into it and talk about why Office 365. So it is not a new. It's been around for a couple of years now, and everybody's sort of been wondering, why do you need to go to Office 365, and what does that bring for an organization like ourselves, and what does that do for us? Well, it's essentially the way people are starting. Sorry, I'm just hearing a little bit of an echo. If you could please go on mute. Can you guys hear me okay?
No, now we can, Wilson.
Yeah.
Okay. I just got a message that I was accidentally muted. Okay, so with the workforce working from anywhere, essentially staff no longer need to be chained to their desks to access company data and be productive. You know, Office 365 gives you that ability that you want to work from mobiles, tablets, laptops, anywhere on the go, and essentially make sure that your data is secure at any point in time and it's backed up. It also gives you the ability to now start small and grow as your business grows. So you do not have to have big capital expense any longer to keep your infrastructure up to date or to have resources and maintenance and everything like that. So you basically pay for the utilization that you use, and because of the scalability, you can scale up anytime you like based on your unique users' needs. So not everybody gets the same license. One person who's in the back office could be doing some analytics work, and they might need an E5 license, which will give them greater Power BI experience, whereas somebody who's on the front line will have a different experience and different need. So the model is extremely flexible and giving you the ability to do work the way you want to do. Collaboration, and it's essentially built for teamwork, right? So email and calendar with Exchange, connecting to people and sharing contents and apps with SharePoint. And then your video, voice, and chat, which was previously with Skype, is now moving to Microsoft Teams, which will give you the ability to collaborate and come together as a team and work on things that might be ad hoc or might be long-term. So it is all with the vision of co-authoring documents and working collaboratively with your colleagues. It also has ability to have a large network of people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis through Yammer and have their opinions on items that you want a broader base to weigh in on, or if you're researching on an item, you can share that across an organization and see if somebody else has an opinion about it. Also has, like I said earlier, you don't worry about servers and maintenance anymore, right? So no capital spent on equipment and trying to keep it current, pay maintenance on it, and essentially having to find resources with the right skills all the time. So somebody else gets to take care of that. The feature I like most is the Work Smarter with Delve. It's essentially a machine learning functionality that's built into the cloud offering from Microsoft that it acts like a personal assistant. And it's interesting because as it gets to know you better through monitoring the types of things that you're doing, the emails that you're responding to, how quickly you're responding to an email, who are you interacting with mostly, it gives you, or who do you follow on Yammer, and it understands what your priorities are, and it understands and makes suggestions on how you can work smarter and move your time more efficiently. So later on, I think Brad will expand on it on how Microsoft used this AI capability and machine learning to make some process changes within their environment. And then a couple other things, it's also about the product releases, right? So Microsoft product releases, gone are the times when you had to wait for an endless cycle of essentially waiting for years for the next product update, or it could be held up by your local support group who's not fully tested the applications and so forth, and the rollout was slowed down. Instead, now you have full access to the latest and greatest product suite and updates from Microsoft instantly. So you are always current, and you will never run into the situation where, for example, we've all run into a situation where we've emailed document to somebody and they go and, well, I don't have that version, and they're already ahead or they're behind and all of that. So this gets you the ability to have instant access to the latest and greatest. From a data loss prevention, there is enterprise class governance and control. Data loss, and data is essentially the company's lifeblood and its documents, and losing these can be disastrous. So Office 365 offers complete data protection and backs up all the data for you for your complete peace of mind. It has features like identity management and conditional access, which you can define how strict or how open you want the access to be. And if it finds anything outside of those parameters, it will deny access to you. It also has features for threat protection and security management all built into it. And that's where, quite frankly, Celero spent most of our time with Microsoft understanding what does it mean when you start putting all these things on a public cloud? What does the governance, what does the security mean for that? And we've been preparing our environment for that as we go. So that's kind of in a nutshell what Office 365 is. I will now hand it over to Brad, who's going to work through and talk to you about Office 365, what it means, what are the benefits, and walk through some of the use cases for it on a day-to-day basis, and then I'll come back and talk about Celero's vision for it. So over to you, Brad. Just want to make sure Brad's unmuted there. Brandy or Kristen, if you can do that, or Brad, can you do that?
Excellent. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Great. Well, thanks, Mosen. Appreciate that introduction, and thank you to the Celero team for inviting me and having me on today. And also thank you everybody for joining. I know things are particularly busy this time of the year as we get ready for Christmas and a number of things going on. So I do appreciate your time today. Wanted to share with you kind of first a little bit about the overall state of the market. What we're seeing is most customers and our partners are really expecting and seeing that programs should be in the cloud these days. The ability to be able to look at these applications and get information from anywhere has really become that standard means that organizations are looking for. And so that's just kind of the fundamental underlying issue that a number of organizations are faced with these days. As we consider what's kind of shifted and changed, we look at what's happened with the traditional IT from years ago. I got started in this business, it was 1995, because I remember Windows 95 had just come out. And so I got started, and when I was doing that, people had a single device that they would bring to their work or would have at work. And that gave an opportunity for the organization to be able to control that device and be able to have that. Whereas now today, most users have multiple devices when they're at the office. And Brandy, could you just move to the next slide here? So that then gives us the ability to be able to have multiple different devices. And the issue that we run into there is these devices in the past were owned by the business, whereas today they tend to be I've got my own phone, but I've got my company data on that phone. I have business-owned devices that I use, like the laptop that I'm working on right now, but I also have my own personal Surface device. And when I start my morning, I come down and I have my coffee and I get online and I start to do some work on my own personal device. And so it's just a natural part of where we are in our society today and the expectation that we have around being able to work. Well, that's created an issue around what used to be a very controlled corporate network with these legacy apps that the environment could be highly controlled to now there's an expectation that there's going to be cloud managed or even software as a service managed apps out there that people can access from anywhere. And that traditional IT used to be very manual in terms of how we would do that. And we would have people come into the environment and spend, time updating and patching servers and doing a number of things of that nature to today we expect that to happen automatically on the back end. And it's really moved from being very reactive to very proactive in the way that people are looking at it. And that's meant we've gone from a very high touch to users wanting to be more self-service. The ability to be able to just quickly go online and do a search to say, how can I do this? And guess what? There's typically a video on how to do it on YouTube, or there's a quick get to know how to do it available. When you're talking about in your own environment and things that you need to know about your organization, we want to talk about how that's being changed with self-service today. And so as we move to the next slide, it then is very important to understand that this has created a much simpler environment for that end user. But through that, we're also trying to drive more security. And we're trying to help organizations understand how they can have a total lower cost of ownership while at the same time getting better productivity, getting a better user experience, being able to drive that higher satisfaction with those end users. And it's also created an opportunity for new collaboration. And we're going to talk a fair bit about teams today and what that means in terms of being able to collaborate. And then Mosen talked a little bit about Delve and the fact of being able to learn a little bit more about what you're doing. As we get more and more information, as we're expected to do more and more, it's very important to take a step back and to understand how are we using our time and what does that look like. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well as we go through this. So in the environments that we have today, the ability to be able to access that information from anywhere is really important. But user interface and the ability to be able to use that same environment that we know and we love to be able to keep that productivity up is very important. So this is really the same product that you know and love, but it has more features. It has the ability to be able to keep up to date, and it has the ability to be able to keep that learning curve down so that you're not just constantly learning new features or seeing a different user interface, but being able to keep up to date with that productivity. That then gives you the ability to access better and more enhanced features as you go through that productivity. So here you're able to use this environment, whether you're on a Windows desktop environment, whether you're on an iPad, whether you're on an Android device, and it gives you that ability then to have a very similar user interface across them. And all of that information is kept up to date, which we'll talk a little bit more as we go through this. When I started at Microsoft about 10 years ago, I had to go in and there was an expectation that I had to manage my mailbox. And so what I would do, I get literally hundreds of emails in a day. And so my inbox would fill up and I would then back up my inbox into PST files that I would keep on my machine, and I would link them back into my Outlook so that as I moved from machine to machine, I could still have my old emails because I never knew when an email would be important that I'd have to go back to. And it was a very manual, time-consuming process. It was very insecure because I was backing it up onto my machine, then I'd have to back it up onto a hard drive, and then put it back onto my new machine and make sure I deleted that old one. Now, for the last several years, I have not even had to worry about my mailbox because, one, the size of my mailbox has increased, and right now I have literally thousands, tens of thousands of emails in my inbox at any given time. And the machine learning on the back end archives those emails for me automatically, keeps them in storage so I can go back and I can look at them, and I never have to touch that. It keeps that data now encrypted so that I'd never have to worry about, did I delete that PST file off that hard drive as I was transferring between machines and all of that. I never have to worry about that anymore. And if I did, I would put it all on OneDrive, which is a central place to be able to store all of this information. It also keeps the transportation rules in check, and it makes sure that when that email or that data leaves your machine, it's actually going through secured networks and getting to the end point in a guaranteed safe way. There was an incident recently where over in Asia, somebody was trying to get in between those points to be able to read and understand what information was being sent across. And so these are the sort of things that happen on the back end that we as Microsoft worry about. And we have a global protection center that we spend about $1 billion a year just securing those online assets so that you don't have to worry about that. We also now have the built-in spam protection, so you don't have to use a third party to be able to do it and try to keep that up to date. This is automatically kept up to date. And we used to get emails, spam emails that would slip through the cracks and get in. I don't remember the last time I got a spam email that's kind of come through. So it's the ability to be able to keep that up to date. Obviously, as we talked about, there's that expanded mobility and the ability to be able to go anywhere and be able to have those emails at your fingertips. And then the next thing that's really important and has been up and coming for a while is being able to link in with other social networks to be able to view that information in a central spot. And so, for example, you can link your information in with LinkedIn and be able to see a contact's information within LinkedIn. So if somebody sends you an email and you're going, so where does this person fit in that organization? Or where do I know this person from? Where might I have met that person from? You can quickly look that person up and get information about, who that person is in the organization. And so as we kind of move, The next thing is the ability to be able to announce that Celero has decided to go on with Teams. And so I'm very excited that Celero is going to be offering Teams as the next generation of collaboration. This is built on the Skype technology, but it's the next generation of Skype technology. And it's really become the central place for collaboration. We actually built this PowerPoint in Teams using that collaboration. And so we set up a Teams site. We put all our files on here. We held our meetings through Teams. We could chat and do all of the stuff that we needed to do to get this presentation ready, all through Teams, even though I'm working at Microsoft. Obviously, we've got Celero on the line in terms of being able to bring that information in. And so it's not only within the organization, it's the ability to be able to use this externally to be able to collaborate on the information that's important. We built this as Microsoft in response to the demand for modern collaboration. The ability to be able to bring all of this information together and not have to go and switch between applications, whether that would be Skype, whether that would be Teams, whether that would be OneDrive, but the ability to be able to have all of that information held centrally and be able to collaborate that on a seamless way. It's now one of these tools that I use day to day, and it's become so ingrained in terms of how I do my job. I can't imagine not having this tool anymore. It would create a big business disruption if I didn't have this tool accessible. This has really then moved this into the next generation, right, in our communication. And this then allows you to come along and not only have your calls, your chats, your meetings, and cross collaboration between those different organizational boundaries that you might have had before, but it allows you to be able to do things like before your meetings, you can come along and you can share and review the information and have a conversation history on the subject matter even before you hold your team. And so you can get that information all ready for a meeting that you need to have. You can then have a meeting, and during the meeting you can share your desktop, you can share attachments. Just this morning we made an announcement where not only can you share attachments, you can share links now to things like your SharePoint or your OneDrive for that information. So you don't actually have to send the documents across, and you don't have to actually attach them in Teams. You can actually just share the hyperlinks. You can share PowerPoint decks and that kind of information going across. You can actually take notes during the meeting, so you can have notes on what happened in the meeting. Just like we're doing right now, you can record the meeting so that you can then view that information later for somebody who actually couldn't make the meeting, that they can view it at a later point. And then after a meeting's over, what becomes important as well is, what about the follow-up? So you had a great meeting, you decided on a bunch of things, or you talked about a bunch of things, but now what's happening with those decisions and the things that were discussed during that meeting? So after the meeting, you can review the recording, you can see the previous meeting notes, you can follow up on it, you can have the conversation to follow up on, those action items that maybe came out of that meeting as well. And so it gives you that central ability to be able to see all of this information. So it becomes a great tool for us, and as you look at this productivity and get more productivity out of the tool, you don't have to move, like I said, between those different environments. It allows you to have that real-time collaboration. It allows you to be able to have that great co-authoring capability. I was talking at the Calgary Chamber of Commerce probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and it was for small businesses. And we were talking about collaboration and why collaboration tools have become so important. And I just made a comment and I said, how often do you have somebody in your office stand up and say, who has the latest version of that Excel file? And everybody in the audience kind of laughed, because it's very true. We have a situation today where many organizations keep multiple versions of Excel files, of PowerPoint. The ability to be able to have a central point to put this information and then be able to have everybody centrally access that. You can see what changes they've made. You can set security and permission on viewing. All of that is now, you have the ability to be able to put that into Teams and be more productive in terms of what you're doing. And you never have to worry about the mistakes of somebody getting the wrong Excel file and quoting something out wrong or making a wrong decision because they didn't have that latest piece of information. And so it's a great tool to be able to do that. And being able to collaborate all of that information together in a central spot. And as we look at this and we look at all the different tools that we have in the Office 365 toolkit, obviously we've got things like the email, the intranet contacts, content management, the ability to be able to have Yammer, Office apps, and Teams. This really kind of comes together because Teams is the hub for teamwork, where groups can actively exchange information and work on core projects and collaborate. Yammer becomes really important for organizations that want to be able to share information across the whole organization. So rather than in a specific team, you want to be able to collaborate with that information right across the organization. We use Teams as an example within my group to say, I've got a question from a partner and I want to ask that of all the PDMs. So rather than trying to send an email to all the PDMs and say, hey, partner development manager is a PDM, by the way. All the partner development managers, I don't have to send them an email and say, has anybody dealt with this and try to get, a bunch of different responses back. I can just open up a chat, have a chat with them that we have on a regular ongoing basis. We have a team site set up to be able to do that. If I have a question about something that's more organizational wide, I can go into our different Yammer groups and I can look at the Canadian Yammer group, or I can look at the corporate Yammer group and I can ask questions across the whole organization and pull that wealth of information that 100,000 people in this company have to be able to get answers for people. And that's the difference between something like Team and Yammer. Outlook, of course, becomes the area where teams can communicate. It's that familiar interface that organizations are used to being able to get that information and being able to organize that. And SharePoint's great for keeping that content at the center for the teamwork, making files and sites and all types of contents easily shareable and accessible across those teams then. And Teams is really kind of that front end often for SharePoint, so that you don't have to worry about, creating and customizing a new SharePoint site. You can just quickly set up a team, put people on it that need to be on the team, and you can start sharing and collaborating that information very, very quickly right in Teams. And then, of course, the whole suite of the Office apps become very important. Everything from the core products that you know and love today, whether that's PowerPoint, Excel, Word, or whether that's some of the other ones in there like Microsoft Project and so forth, you can then now collaborate in real time with other users in those documents rather than having multiple copies and versions of that information. And so the next thing that I want to talk about is something, it's really one of my favorite features in Office 365. And it's really this analytics. I talked earlier about the fact that we're being asked to do more and more with these tools. These tools have enabled more productivity. It's meant more demands on our time. And My Analytics is a tool that uses Delve and other technology, bringing that together so that you get a summary of how you're spending your time. And you can make informed decisions then about what you're doing. So rather than coming along and saying, boy, I think I spend a lot of time in meetings. I think I spend a lot of time doing emails. I think I spend a lot of time after hours. The analytics tool gives you a insight in terms of how you're spending your time. And so you can understand how much time do you spend doing your emails. And it actually will give you a comparison to how your whole organization spends time on emails. And so I can look at mine and I can see that I spend about 5 hours more doing emails a week than most average people in the organization in Microsoft spend. I can look at it and I can say, I spend more time in meetings than others. Some of the newer versions of Outlook, and we're starting to roll out more and more features in this, is it will come up with a message to say, you have a lot of meetings this week. We think that you should probably consider spending some time in your focus time. Do you want us to find some focus time in your calendar to be able to get some other work done? And so the artificial intelligence and the learning on the back end helps you be more productive rather than just going through your day trying to figure out where you're really spending your time. The other thing that it gives you is it gives your organization and your divisions ability to be able to see how people are spending their time within the organization. And to give you a real life example of what happened in Microsoft going back a few years ago, we were looking at this and we realized right from the top of the organization down that we were spending a lot of time in internal meetings. And I remember being at a conference and our president, worldwide CEO, stood up in front of everybody and said, "We have made a decision that we have told all of your managers," and I was a manager at the time and I got an email on this, saying that you have to cancel your internal meetings, that there's now guidelines that say you cannot spend as a manager, you cannot have more than 5 hours of team meetings in a month, and that any individual person should not have any more than 5 hours of internal meetings in a week. And so it gave that insight to say, we are spending too much time being internally focused and not enough time being externally focused. We have too many demands on our people to do the internal things and not be focused on our customers, on our partners, on doing the things that are actually going to drive satisfaction. And so that's just a real life example of where you can take this information and not only can you say, well, that's neat, that's interesting, but you can make conscious decisions about what that means for your day-to-day life, what it means for your career. We're often being asked to take on additional responsibility. It gives you the ability to be able to go back to a manager and to say, this is how I'm spending my time. This is not a micromanagement tool. The managers do not get to see individual results in terms of what this looks like. It gives you the ability and the control to be able to go back and say, you've asked me to pick up this new project or this new workload. Help me understand what I should be dropping off here so that I can actually be more productive to the organization, that I can do these things that are actually going to drive the right areas of the business. It also helps you understand who you're collaborating with in the organization. And so you can actually see where you're sharing your documents, who's actually been the ones that you're emailing with, how are you spending that time and getting the information that you need in the organization. And so you can better understand going forward, who do you need to share certain information with, and or who's giving you the right information that you then need to make important decisions. And so again, the My Analytics tool is a very important tool in my mind, and it's one of my favorite things. I get a weekly summary that tells me how I'm spending my time. I can go in there anytime, but it gives me that weekly summary that I can understand, what am I doing? How am I spending my time? Am I really being productive and doing the things that are most important? So with all of this, with all these new features and the new benefits and the areas that are coming out, one of the concerns that we hear sometimes is, well, is this going to be changing all the time? Am I going to be logging in and every time, I'm going to see a different user interface and I'm going to have to learn new features? We've really had to come along and say, look, we've got to balance the need of getting the right information, making sure that things are secure and the new features out in a critical timeline, but also not overwhelming end users with constant new features and functionality and confusing people on how to do new things. And so what we've done is we've set up a cadence where around every month you're going to get an update that will happen mostly on the back end. And there'll be some improvements, there'll be security releases and updates, making sure that everything is moving along the way that it needs to. And then about twice a year, you'll get specific new features that will come out. And so it'll add in some new features around maybe being able to use your voice to dictate an email, give you the ability to be able to dictate documents, different features like that. Artificial intelligence is another area that we're adding more and more functionality in to be able to help you understand how you're doing your work, make things happen a little bit easier for you. And so artificial intelligence is another thing that will come in every once in a while. The other thing that is happening is every few years we'll release a new version, just like we did before. And so these new versions, while they may not change as much kind of on the front end, they'll have some new major features. Some may be on the back end of that you don't necessarily see day to day, but there'll be some features on the front end that will be a change, and there'll be some new productivity. So you get the benefits of receiving the current technology, that security that you need for your organization, especially in the financial services market, but also without getting that interruption to your daily productivity that can be so critical for all businesses. And so as we think about these things, one of the things that we talked about with Celero as we were putting this together was really around use cases. So it's great to talk about, fun new technology and what this looks like and artificial intelligence and that, but what becomes really important is how are you using this technology day to day? How is this actually going to help you be more productive, help you in the scenarios and the situations you find yourself in your business? And so what we wanted to do was just spend a few minutes going through at a very, very high level a couple of case scenarios, real life scenarios that we think you probably have run into or people that you have in your organization. And so we want to talk about what that means for your business. And it's really then technology, not just for the sake of technology, but it's the ability to make you more efficient. So over the last several years, I've been involved with or I've watched several mergers and acquisitions. And I understand in the credit union space and in the financial sector space, there's quite a number of these mergers and acquisitions going on. I've seen these done very well, and I've seen these be, just to be frank, a little bit of a train wreck. And so reflecting on what the differences are between organizations that have done this well and when I've seen it done well and when it hasn't done well, one of the main things that I find is it is very, very important for users when there's a merger and acquisition, this is true of any time, but particularly between mergers and acquisitions, that users understand what their role is as that organization is going through that merger and acquisition. The other thing that becomes then really important is making sure that users know where that latest information is around how to do their job, their role, their responsibility, and not necessarily the way that they've done things in the past. And so leveraging the tools that we've talked about here, like, for example, Teams, and the ability to be able to have a continuous discussion across a distributed team to be able to say, I've got this question, I'm trying to do these things, I've always done it this way in the past, but how am I expected to do this going forward? What does this look like? Who holds this additional information? It's really that streamline around the project communication and tools, that ability to be able to provide status updates and get feedback and coordinate the tasks as you're going through those mergers, helping users understand where they fit in and what they're supposed to do and making sure that they have that so that they can share the files and collaborate on those deliverables, rather than people struggling trying to figure out where is that information, whose server is that on, whose file share is that on, is that on our SharePoint or is that on someone else's SharePoint, where do I get that information or who do I talk to? And that really then helps you have the project members get set up quickly, be able to measure results, be able to take a look at this and set up good policy. It then gives those clear roles and responsibilities across the organization. And it really provides that clarity on the organizational goals that make mergers and acquisitions then so critically important. And I've often seen mergers where you hope that the merger is going to be a 1 + 1 = 3. And sometimes those mergers, because of the difficulties organizations have gone through, really have not gotten that uplift that they were looking for. And so the ability to be able to collaborate and get this information together and provide that clarity to the users is so important. The other area is around mobility. And I talked about this right at the beginning, how important mobility is to users these days. It's just become the norm now that we should be able to see our information and access this information. And this is really a bit of my life. I'm on the road quite a bit. I'm on planes, I'm in cars, I'm meeting, whether I'm at my home office, whether I'm at the downtown office, whether I'm in Toronto or I'm in Seattle for meetings, I can now quickly access my information no matter where I'm at. You may have a situation where your account reps are out meeting with businesses, they're meeting with customers, they're going between those meetings, and they need to be able to have not only their emails, but they need to have the latest information on the offerings that you have as a credit union or as a financial institution, being able to know where that central information is, being able to make sure that they're not missing information as they're out of the office, and always having that there. And it provides that ability to have the offline capabilities so that they can do their job when they're maybe meeting a place where they can't get online, but then being able to have that real collaboration when they're on the road and they're back online, and not being able to, not missing the things that are happening back at the office just because they happen to be on the road doing what's really important, and that's meeting with customers. You may have branch managers that move between the different branches and offices, and the ability to be able to have that information no matter where they are, and access to it. All you need is a Wi-Fi point to be able to get that information, and still using that same security model as if you were in the office. Being able to have that guaranteed transit route, being able to share information on OneDrive, and have that central spot to store that information no matter what device you're on. You can go home at night and you can access your OneDrive and get that information that you started working on in the office when you have some downtime, or being able to review the notes for your meeting the next day, whether you're at home or whether you're at the office. And so this mobility has become very, very important for organizations, but the security and the need to be able to have real-time information has become really important and is the new norm. The other area is the power user. The user who is in the office for most of the time, who really needs to be able to access that information, but they need to access lots of information across lots of different points. They pull that information together. Maybe they're using Excel and Power Pivot, or maybe they're using Power BI. They're using Teams to be able to view conversations across multiple different groups or teams to be able to get resolutions. They need to be able to see the continuous discussion across those distributed teams and be able to understand how people are viewing that information and what information is kind of coming through. Also being able to discuss those ideas, requirements, and gather that input in a very open format so that they're getting that latest information and not having to worry about that. We're finding that the ability then to be able to store information in that central spot, and the compliance that comes along with that is very important. I had a situation a few years ago where one of my team members stored some information on their personal or on the work machine, and the hard drive had a problem. And we then were audited as a group, and we needed to be able to provide that information, but the hard drive had crashed. And I set down a standard at that point, and I said to my team, from this point forward, everything goes on your OneDrive. There is nothing that gets stored on your work machine or your personal machine. Everything goes onto your OneDrive, so that we've got a standard in terms of where that documentation is stored. It's there for compliance. We don't have to worry about it. It's automatically backed up. And so the ability to be able to have that with those power users who are really sharing that latest content and draft, and that they're making those important decisions within the organization, and being able to have that information automated, or whether it's analytics tools that they're leveraging, and being able to have that information there. And so the power user is also the one who then benefits from this, because they can access that information from anywhere and get that information in real time and be able to power that part of the organization. So with that, and with those three examples, I'm going to hand things back to Mohsen at this time. Appreciate everybody's interest and information, and in a few minutes we'll take some questions as well. Thanks, Mohsen.
Great, thanks, Brad. Okay, so why Celero, right? The big question. I can put in my credit card information on Microsoft.com and set up, and here we go. Here's an Office 365 account, and that's a good question. We wanted to help you with that, and so what Celero brings to the table is industry expertise. We understand financial services requires strict data governance and security processes and procedures, and with keeping that in mind, we have laid the groundwork that's necessary to keep your data secure even when it's in a public cloud. That also means understanding the compliance requirements and making sure that data that is going to the cloud is inspected and stored according to your needs, and compliance requirements are met accordingly. In addition, we have worked through with Microsoft with keeping the end user in mind, because user experience is key. You don't want to be learning as you're implementing. You want to be you want a partner who's drawn up a repeatable process, keeping best industry practices in mind, and making sure that when you do the migration, the user experience is flawless. So we will work through with you on a repeatable process, which I'll talk to you in a moment, on how you get from your on-prem solution, whether that's hosted with Celero or you're running an on-prem Exchange and Skype on your own in your own premises. We have fully managed migrations offerings for Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and including like the assessments, the planning, the migration, and the post support. So you do literally get end-to-end support. The other side of it is license management and having expertise and understanding to make sure what your right mix of that licensing is specific to your credit union is extremely important. We understand that the needs of a frontline MSR, for example, are different than somebody who's in the back office or somebody that's a mobile specialist and going and meeting your members on the road, or a system administrator or an executive, right? So everybody has unique needs, and we have the capability and expertise to understand, assess them, and make recommendations on that on the licensing structure accordingly. And that's quite frankly part of understanding, having this deep knowledge to optimize the cost efficiencies that Office 365 and other cloud services bring to you. Enterprise class security, you can't talk about that enough, right? Because with the potential threats that are out there, making sure that the proper security reporting, permissions management, monitoring, and alerting is in place is extremely key, and that's what Celero brings to the table. Protecting yourself from malware and spam filters, and providing that conditional access. So even if you have leaked credentials out there, or if you have a suspicious login, those you still would not be able to get in. Or having multi-factor authentication. Celero has worked through these things with Microsoft and come up with a standard governance policy on how all of these things will be rolled out and kept in check and in control. In addition to that, you have the ability to have a single point of contact for through the service desk at Celero. These could be things such as password resets, basic device troubleshooting, kind of answering any how-to questions that there might be, or proactive device monitoring and management and troubleshooting those. And these could be items that are related to network or your mailbox or your mobile device. Any of those services, you basically have a single point of contact to get the resolution in a timely manner for all your items. And you're not essentially in a large queue with Microsoft when you're going direct. We also have custom training services. Celero will have the ability to provide a customized training model if that's the need of your organization, to help with the content and limit and organize it to basically have the right productivity and adoption for the investment that you're making. So it is important, again, back to the user experience, that people adopt your product, and it's not just a new piece of technology that's out there. So it is a critical area. Last but not least is just the value adds of knowing Celero, knowing that there are fixed costs for support costs for the product that you're putting in. There's speed to value of realizing that and getting it done the right time. And there's no skills gap that you have to assess or people cost. It is all taken care of you. I'll also talk about a plan on a page and kind of high level of what Celero's put together on how we will go about doing these implementations. So essentially, any Office 365 project will be divided into 4 different phases: assessment, remediation, enablement, and migration. In the assessment phase, really what we're doing is assessing your current environment and making and having an understanding of what are all the different kinds of applications that are being run, what are all the different versions of operating system and browsers that are out there. What does your network look like? What does the other infrastructure look like? And then what are your identity requirements going forward and authentication? So what are some of those things that will have to be remediated in your current environment to get it ready to start enabling some of the workloads into the cloud? So we will go through that and essentially by the end of the assessment phase have a remediation plan of things that would have to be done in order to get your environment in a position where you can start beginning to fix those things and getting it ready. In remediation, again, the items that have been deemed that need to be resolved, whether that be network or exchange or whatever the item might be, or desktop, we would go through and perform those remediation tasks and ensure that the results are qualified at the end of the remediation. Once the remediation is complete, we move on to enablement, which is initiating the core onboarding of the services. So essentially activating your tenant with Microsoft, adding your domain, verifying the ownership of that, making sure all the right network access is set up on the DNS inside. If Celero manages your network, we will make sure that there's enough bandwidth reservation and ability that it'll be a seamless experience and there won't be any degradation in quality once the user is migrated. Provisioning, email flow, and migrating of that data, and then depending if you have Skype for Business today or not, we would have additional items on Teams that we would do, and voice over IP if you have modern communication or want to have modern communication. Those would be some of the items that we would begin enabling. And then finally, migration is enabling all the different product sets and making sure that the data transfer happened accurately and you're able to access those services without any issues, and making sure that there's support available through that process for you. So I know I went through that really quickly, but these tasks have a very thorough detailed plan under each one of them that Celero has gone through and essentially worked through with Microsoft in developing it. So it is our custom IP that we will be using and going through as we go through the process. I'll just be cognizant of time. I will pass it to Brandy, who will talk about the onboarding process, and we'll get to questions right after.
Thanks, Mohsen. So to build further on the steps that Mohsen has outlined, I'll go over the specifics regarding the onboarding process. For existing clients that subscribe to any one of Celero's on-premise hosted solutions, whether that be email, Skype for Business, and or SharePoint, we are creating a master rollout schedule. It will be similar to what we've done in the past when we've upgraded major versions of our email or SharePoint in our on-premise environment. Now, various factors will play into making the schedule. One component is customer interest. So if you have an immediate business need or want to move to Office 365, then please engage with your account executive with your expression of this early interest. While we cannot provide any guarantees, we are going to try and do our best to accommodate these requests. Another component that impacts the placement of in the schedule will be the size of your migration, meaning if you have only subscribed to, say, email services, there's less complexity compared to a client that might subscribe to all services. As you're notified about your placement in the rollout schedule, you will be provided with an ordering package to sign up for the new service. If you've subscribed to our hosted services in the past, you'll be used to executing separate schedules for each product that you subscribe to. Going forward, we're going to be consolidating it into a single streamlined ordering document with options to choose from. One of the items is the term of the service and the period you want to subscribe to the service, with 1 year being a minimum. The next involves selecting the licensing options and quantities that you want to subscribe to. The conversation around licensing is a shift compared with our existing services. Previously, the end user license was incorporated into your monthly fees. It involved a single service provider license agreement, otherwise called a SPLA license. But going forward, there'll be a variety of licensing options available, and this will give you an option to subscribe to licensing based on the specific needs of your end users. So it's no longer a one license fits all type of approach. Now, of course, with options can come some complexity, but Celero is here. We have our subject matter experts that can help assist and guide you through this new process. The ordering document will also outline Celero's managed service fees. These are per user fees and encompass some of the items that Mohsen outlined earlier of our managed services. Next are the migration fees, which are the one-time fees to migrate or implement you into the cloud environment. And these fees will vary on the services you want to enable. The last items in the ordering document are the service level agreements and online service terms. For existing clients, the current service levels are based on the service operating in Celero's data center and product descriptions based on a shared application model. As we move forward to a cloud-based solution, there's also going to be a shift for both the service level and product feature functionality. Service levels will be defined by Microsoft standards, which are based on decades of providing the largest online services to clients worldwide. Online service terms is where Microsoft outlines the core features of each service. The move from a shared environment to a dedicated tenant, this is going to give you new opportunities to enable add-on apps or additional cloud integrations that are specific for individual strategic requirements. Well, the focus so far has really been around onboarding existing clients. As Mohsen mentioned, our managed services for Office 365 will also be available for new client requests. And that onboarding process for new clients will be similar in that we'll follow the same phases for new implementations as we do for migrating existing. So if you have any interest in that service, please reach out to your account exec. And finally, if you haven't seen it already, Celero is holding a licensing overview session on December 10th that I would highly recommend that you attend if you want to learn more about the licensing options and other fee components that we talked about today. So I think now we'll move on to some questions. I'll pass it back over to Mohsen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brandy. I see that there's a couple of questions on the chat, so we'll begin with answering those and then open up for any live questions. So first question is from Darren Winder. Darren is asking, where's the data stored? So we've looked at the data residency requirements. The data will remain in Canada and Toronto or Quebec City, which is the Canadian region for Microsoft Azure. And we've ensured that it is based on the geolocation of where the users are accessing the data from. So in your case, Darren, and others on the call, it would remain in Canada. The other question, there's another question, will Celero assist in migration from current Microsoft products to Office 365? That is SharePoint, absolutely. So that's part of our assessment phase of the program, where we'll go through what you have on-prem today and what are your needs, and determine what mix of services do you need. It could be a combination of 100% everything going to Celero to migrate. It could be a 50-50, or you might want to do bulk of the work if you are running things on-prem today. So we will have those options available for you. Just another question that came up is, when can we expect to get the migration package? So I think, Brandy, can you answer that one?
The current intent is, once we have the repeatable process and the migration plan built out, that we would provide the documentation so far out from your actual migration. So it would depend where you would be in the schedule as to how far out you would get that information.
Yeah, so just to build on that, in terms of getting into the queue for your implementation, you can get in touch with your AE now and get get the term of the contract and those things, the ball rolling in that. When we get to your implementation, the actual rollout will dictate when do we do the different phases of your migration, the assessments and licensing and all those items. Another question that's just come up is this a mandatory upgrade, or when do we have to upgrade by? I'm assuming the person who's asking the question is currently on-prem with Celero. So the short answer to that is this a mandatory upgrade? It's not a mandatory upgrade at the moment. Celero does intend to move our on-prem customers and give them an option to go to Office 365. At this time, we have not discussed or any plans of removing or shutting down our on-prem services, although that is our final intent. So to answer your question, no date in mind. We'd like to actually work with our customers and determining what's the right time for them and move through that. We do have a very aggressive migration plan for 2019 and 2020. So if you don't want to be at the front of the bus and maybe you want to be at the later end, that's fine. Or if you want to be at the front, that can work too as well. Next question is there group pricing through Celero versus going direct? So Celero does get, so the pricing that you see on Microsoft's website when you go direct, Celero does get a discount on that price. And when we work with you, and it's different based on the license. So it's not the same discount that we receive on it as part of a group purchase. So when we work with you in the assessment and say, figure out what your licensing needs are, we will cater to your custom licensing and give you a quote specifically on that. So it's not a one answer fits all. It will be based on kind of your mix of the licensing requirements. So yes, to answer your question, there is a difference in what you see on Microsoft's site versus going through Celero. Darren is asking, how do I register for the licensing overview session? So that's Brandy. Can you help me with that? I don't.
Yeah, there'll be two options. We'll be giving the information to the account execs to send out, similar to how the invites came out for today's session. And then there'll also be an ability through, I believe it's through the extranet, to sign up as well. And so we'll get those details out.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, it is December 10th when the next session is on licensing. Stephen Tanner, directed at Microsoft, in your experience, would you recommend migrating to Office 365 ourselves or go through a cloud service provider like Celero? What has been your experience? Brad, you want to take a run at that one? Brad, are you on mute maybe? Randy, can you see if Brad's on the call?
He's on the call. He's showing as mute.
Can you unmute him?
Oh, I think, yeah, he just went on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't unmute on my end, so I needed Brandy to do it. So yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very good question because we do believe in giving customers choice in terms of whether they buy this directly or whether they buy it through a partner. I'll answer that maybe kind of through what we found as we've looked at customers who have bought both direct and through partners. Customers who buy direct, typically the satisfaction that we have when we look back and we do reviews on how satisfied they are with the product are less satisfied than when they work through a partner. In particular, we find that when a customer buys through not only a partner who specializes in Office 365, but who has industry vertical knowledge, that the satisfaction and the productivity that they get through the application goes way up. And so it is a much better experience when you're doing that. There's just a number of things that have to be considered in this, and Celero's made some major investments in training people, putting together the migration plans, and we'll have the experience of doing this across multiple customers. And so that would be the recommendation that I would have, is look at this not only from the point of view of working with a partner who has the experience in Office 365, but look at somebody who has the vertical and industry experience, who understands your business, is very critical in this.
Okay, are there any other live questions over and above? Let me give anybody who wants to ask any other questions. Okay, there's another question. Would Office 365 mean we could eliminate all our on-prem Celero email services, Exchange, BES? Correct. That is the answer. I have to be careful when I say everything, just because there is a small piece. There's actually a large piece on identity management, and it would come down to what your future plans are for identity and single sign-on in the future. So yes, you could get rid of Exchange, BES, and all of these other product-related items. You might want to consider potentially having Azure AD Connect, which is essentially your go-to between managing your identities between on-prem and the cloud. And that would be in the case if you want to have seamless sign-on capabilities for applications that are outside of Office 365. So that'd be my only caveat. Other than that, yeah, you can pretty much get rid of everything else. And that might not be a need as well there, Stephen. You might say, no, I want cloud-only identities, and I want to fast-track my migration to the cloud. The longer I hold on to the on-prem Active Directory, the longer it will be, my journey will be. So you might decide against it. So it really comes down to kind of the decisions that you make along the process. Just going one more time. Anybody else have any questions here? Okay, one more. Switching to Office 365, does Celero still manage our inbound and outbound email environment, or it's Microsoft? I read their advanced protection is decent. So at the beginning, we will continue to manage your inbound and outbound. You can subscribe, depending again on your license, to the advanced threat protection and security services, which are the new tools made for the cloud and used on the cloud. So we highly encourage everybody to get those licenses. What Celero will do is continue to run our email gateway for more than one reason, but one of the main ones is your ancillary devices, such as your printers. If you have any old legacy printers who don't have the capability to talk to Office 365 today, you will still have the ability to go through the gateway and route your emails through that. So Celero will continue to maintain that checkpoint until such time that the environment's matured across our customer base, and then we would decommission that. So at the beginning, that will be there. Okay, very good. Awesome. So thank you again, everybody, for joining today. The recording of this session will be available along with an FAQ document and the PDF for the slides from today's session. Our next session will be December 10th. Just subscribe to receive our news updates and webinars through our extranet website. And if you have any questions or require any further assistance, please contact your account exec and they'll certainly route them through to the team. So again, thank you very much for taking the time today. Have yourself a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you soon.